And I am live. This is Internal Sadist podcast number 2. This one's going to be about women. This one's going to be about women. Can they can they take respons Oh shoot. This one's going to be about women and their ability to, if for all intents and purposes. Um the irony to it is, as far as women being able to take responsibility, can they take responsibility? Yeah, they can. Um No, I mean, well, they won't take responsibility. That's not what it's really about, them taking responsibility or not. It's mainly about the topics today is going to be pretty much cover women's views on the dating dynamics. Women are emotionally and socially intelligent. Are they aware of what they're doing, and can they grasp the validity or the severity of their actions? Is typically what this podcast is going to be about. That's what this podcast is pretty much going to cover. So, the funny thing about women is, at the end of the day, the main question is, can they take responsibility for their actions? The answer is no, because they don't really have to. For all intents and purposes, women don't have to take responsibility for their actions. It's sad, but it's so true that they don't have to take responsibility for their actions. And the sad part about that is, we live in a society where women don't even necessarily have to take responsibility for their actions, on top of the fact that men around them pretty much give them the carte blanche to not take responsibility. Um, the thing about women is, at the end of the day, no matter how much you might dislike women or hate women or whatever your stick is or your bag is, women are always going to be emotionally and socially smarter than men. Typically, women are going to be and emotionally smarter and socially smarter than men, for the reason that they hold all the cards, and they hold all the power in the social setting, and or they hold all the power in the emotional department. For all intents and purposes, they're able to tap into another person's emotions so they can get the proper help that they actually need. Even if it's their fault, they can always convince somebody that it's not their fault and they should help them anyway. It's typically how it works, because they're able to pass blame so freely. This is why we get women who tend to overlook or look the other way on certain things, for all intents and purposes. And it's sad that they can do this. And the sad part about that is, we just allow them to. Like, there's no other way around it besides the fact that we just allow them to. And the crazy part about it is, it's not just the men. It's not just men who co-sign on this. Other women co-sign on this. So everybody thinks it's to everybody's consensus is pretty much, obviously he did something wrong, for all intents and purposes. No matter what the hell she did, it's obviously he did something wrong. She could be all types of wrong to the nth degree, but 9 times out of 10, they're going to believe that obviously the man did something wrong for her to be in that mood. And typically, as a man, if you know anything about women, you really don't have to be in the wrong for her to be in a bad mood. She's just in a bad mood. Typically, women have a problem with controlling their emotions and their anger and their actions. And the sad part about that is, they tend to be more likely to actually put their hands on somebody than a man, because they believe that they live in a society that they can pretty much do this stuff with such carte blanche, up until there's a guy that's the equal opportunity head buster that'll deck them. Then all of a sudden, now they go back to, they remember they're a girl and they want to play victim, for all intents and purposes. And it's typically how it works. I mean, only women that don't really play victim is the ones that are drunk as hell when they get into a fight with a man, but then they wake up the next day, then they want to be victim after they came down from their buzz and their drunkenness, which is actually pretty interesting. But the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, women's ability to pass blame onto other people, give them the carte blanche to be able to ignore, give them the carte blanche to basically be able to ignore, I mean, to negate the fact that they don't have to take responsibility or understand the validity or consequences of what they did for all intents and purposes. So they don't have to take responsibility. I mean, they grasp what's wrong with it, but the sad part about that is they don't have to grasp it for very long before they can pass it off on somebody else's actions for all intents and purposes. This is how you can get like the crazy op-eds about like men this, men that, men this, men that. Women understand the severity of the situation, but the sad part about that is because everybody's giving them carte blanche this long, they don't have to take responsibility for anything they've done. So they can pass the blame anytime, anywhere, for any reason, let it be whatever. A good example of passing blame for their actions was Katie Anthony, the chick that murdered her child. Uh, Passing blame at an opening argument was her 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 lawyer basically used an excuse that she was molested or raped as a child for all intents and purposes. Now think about that shit. What the hell does that got to do with this case today? Normally, any other time, had it been a man, they'd have probably swept that under the rug or not even let that fucking thing slide for all intents and purposes. But for some odd reason, because she's a woman, they let that slide in the opening argument. Normally, you wouldn't let shit like that slide in the opening argument because it's a murder case. But because it's a woman, we got to pretty much got to come up with all the stuff to make them seem like they're cool or make them seem like it's not their fault. And like what Sigma said, basically they know this and they do it regularly for all intents and purposes. The sad part about that is we allow it to happen. We allow it to happen, sadly. The crazy part about that is because of this, how society is set up and how we got everything set up, we pretty much let them do it with immunity for all intents and purposes. Um, but the irony to it is there are people that'll call them out on their bullshit, but there's also the white knight army that'll come to their rescue and or cuck out for them for all intents and purposes and say that the person who's calling them out is wrong and they shouldn't pick on her because she's a female, despite the fact that we live in a day and age where women and men supposedly supposed to be equal. Only way that a woman would ever be equal to a man in a physical realm is if she starts crying. Then she gets a bunch of other men to come to her rescue, or she cries to the police, or she lies on her husband in court so she can actually get custody of children. These are only reasons. This is the only way that women can ever be equal to men. Because if they were to do that without all this other stuff, without all these other guys or all these other protections, they would lose very badly. The sad part about that is women will never be equal to men for the fact that they need a buffer or you know, they need extra extra casualties so they can actually make their goal a successful goal for all intents and purposes. Let it be the government, let it be the police, let it be a bunch of men who are white knights, let it be simps, let it be cucks, let it be you name it for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is because we allow them to do this, it gives them immunity to any fucking thing that they're supposed to do or they should have to do with society. And it's typically how it works because we're still working off this European model where women are, looked at as milady. This is typically why women can get away with shit. Because if you ever look at all those movies back in the day, if you look at the movies from back in the day where they were referring to women as miladies, those women were usually doing some pretty savage shit. And when they got caught, they basically, white knighted for her, helped her back in her carriage, and sent her on her merry way and arrested the guy, despite the fact that the guy probably was innocent. You see what I'm saying? And it's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is women always had the carte blanche to get away with shit like that, even in England and or the European countries back in those days. And the sad part about that is that's pretty much been a woman thing. That's pretty much been a thing for that society for all intents and purposes. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. The problem is though, if you do that, you give them the right to basically berate you and do stupid shit like that, and or say something simple about you that's not true. The problem is you have to deal with them. You have to deal with them eventually, somehow, some way to basically remain safe and secure for all intents and purposes when you do it. Because at the end of the day, you can walk on by all you want to, but that's not going to stop them from coming up with something in her head to basically make you sound like a bad person. It's typically how that works because women are very good at that. They'll pretty much make you sound like a very bad person. You don't have to necessarily do anything wrong. Hell, you could be on camera, not even close to that person, and your life could be ran through hell. Just ask that guy from that one country that the one woman accused of raping her. Meanwhile, they weren't even, if you look at the camera, he was on one side of the train station, she was on another side of the train station, and they never even crossed paths, but she accused him of rape. The sad part about that is that guy's life was derailed all the way up until they actually got the evidence. But the sad part about that, till this day, he is still seen as a rapist for that fact. And this is the sad part. This is the sad reality of the day when it comes down to it. And women like, sometimes you got to take some casualties. It's typically women's thoughts on the shit. Well, no. How about you actually accuse the right person? Or how about you not accuse people if nothing ever happened to you? And the sad part about that is I've known women who actually accuse other men for raping them when in fact it was actually the man that they actually liked who actually did it. You see what I'm saying? And the sad part about that is I met a lot of women that do that shit. So they'll accuse another man of they'll accuse a whole other man of rape, all because they like the guy, and they don't want to see nothing happen to that guy. And the sad part about that is now this other guy's getting derailed without any rape evidence because she didn't go to the hospital to get a rape kit done. So now there's no rape evidence there. And the sad part about that is we're just working off of feelings and believe her. Sad part about that is the guy who actually did the raping walking free, but the innocent guy got to go to jail. It's typically how that works. And the sad part about that is it's not the fact that, and people always say women don't grasp the validity or the gravity of their situation that they're in, or they put other people in. They do. They don't care because they can always pass it off to other people. It's typically how that works. So it's not the fact that they don't grasp it. It's the fact that they just don't care. And the fact that they live in a society where that gives them the carte blanche and not care and pass it off and put it on somebody else's lap for all intents and purposes. And this is typically the society this is a society of women that we got right nowadays, where they can literally do shit like that, and everybody's wondering why they're not going down for like the same amount of time as a man. And the sad part about that, you'll see that good example when you'll see shit like that would be when women are getting in trouble for sexually assaulting students. Now, typically, if you're a man and you're doing this stuff, you're probably going to get 7 years or more for all intents and purposes. Or you're probably getting years on top of years on top of years, depending on how many acts of that you actually engaged in for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that, so if you did it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, you'll probably end up with like anywhere between 7 to or 6 to like 7 to like to 20 something years to 30 something years for all intents and purposes in prison if you actually do some shit like that if you're a man. The sad part about when it comes to women, even if they did repeat acts on the same student, they only serve 1 year for 1 year or 6 months. They get charged 1 year or 6 months for each of their counts against the boy. And it's typically how it works. The judge will either charge them 1 year or 3 years because they don't want to, send a woman to jail, despite the fact that she pretty much is corrupting a minor and she pretty much slept with a minor. but they don't want to send her to jail for a long haul because women. And it's sad that it happens that way because like then you'll see women that'll have like multiple counts of this stuff and they only serve like 5 years in jail, or and they won't have to register. And the sad part about that is they won't have to register as sexual offenders, which is like totally mind blowing because any man that's accused of that, I think even before he even remotely goes to trial, he's automatically on that list. Like, how's that fucking work? Like, if you're accused of this shit, your whole entire life gets derailed by this shit. But the sad part about that is women can do this shit and nothing happen, or very minimum happen. And hell, there's women that get probation instead of actually going to jail for this shit. You'll get like 2 years probation, 6 months probation, 6 months in jail and a year of probation, just stuff like that. And the sad part about that is a lot of them don't even lose their teaching license. They're allowed to teach when they come back out. They're allowed to do a lot of stupid shit. Hell, there was a woman who slept with an underage boy, got pregnant. Now this underage boy is paying child support. Let that shit sink in. That underage boy has to pay child support. He's not even old enough to even remotely get a summer job, and he still has to pay child support to this woman. Like, think about that shit. This is the society that we live in. He has to pay this woman child support, and the sad part about that, I don't even think he's even paying the child support. His mother and father are literally paying this woman child support. Like, think about this shit. That is like the craziest shit you'll ever think of. And that's good if you've been lucky. Just stay lucky. Knock on wood. And the sad part about that is you'll run into people like that, and you'll run into people who think a certain way or believe a certain thing, and then they want to act upon it or act out on it for all intents and purposes, or they want to play stupid or be stupid about a lot of the shit, which is sad. Like, no, let it go. And the sad part about that is when you run into people who will do shit like this, you tend to get caught off guard, or you tend to not understand the gravity of the situation you just put yourself in by accident when you actually get into those situations. Because at the end of the day, it don't matter what it is, who it is, and why it is. Women have the carte blanche to accuse you of any damn thing they want. And then everybody just has to believe her because she's a woman. And it's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is when one too many people do that shit, it starts to get it starts to turn into like almost like a mob mentality. And the sad part about that is, the person goes from being innocent to being brutally beaten, and nobody ever apologizes to the person. Nobody ever tells them they're sorry that this happened to you. He's basically just supposed to get up and move on, despite the fact that he's probably like a good example of something that happened to a guy. I can't forget his name, but he was accused of sexually assaulting a woman, and these people beat him senseless. They beat him so badly. He had a detached retina. He's blind in one eye. He can't move his neck. His arm is like shattered in multiple places, so he couldn't really move his arm. And they stomped him so bad, they literally had 2 of his discs bulging out, and 2 of his discs were slipped. Nobody ever apologized to this poor guy for doing all this shit. Like, think about that shit. Nobody ever apologized to this guy. Nobody ever said sorry. I don't even think he even got compensation for false accusation. Like, think about this shit. He never even got compensated for this false accusation. The judge didn't tell him sorry. The woman didn't have to apologize. All the people who beat him to damn near a bloody pulp didn't have to apologize. And at the end of the day, despite the fact that he was innocent, this man is still seen as a villain, or a predator for all intents and purposes. Like, this is the society. This is the society we live in, where like a woman comes up, you just have to believe her, despite the fact that she could be lying, and there's no evidence, but we just have to believe her because believe women, which is very sad. Like, he has a detached retina now. He was an innocent man, and now he has a detached retina, and he's blind. He's peripherally blind, and he's blind in the other eye. Like, where's the compassion for that guy? Where the hell's the compassion for that guy? And the sad part about that is, like I said, because we live in a society where women pretty much grasp, women do grasp the validity and the severity of their actions. But the sad part about that is, because women, they can pretty much pass it off to other people or put it on other people who actually to actually take the charges and or take, and so they can don't have to really take full responsibility for their actions, because they can simply say, as we always say in the manosphere, plead ignorance or plead plausible deniability, which is sad. And a good example of that is if she's upset with somebody, she could rally a bunch of men to go fuck up somebody or go harass somebody or go pick on somebody. And the sad part about that is that man can be totally innocent of anything, but the sad part about that is she'll go rile up those men to go pretty much fuck up people for her. And the sad part about that, when it's all said and done, she never has to take any responsibility for uh sending people that person's way, especially if he got injured. It's usually the people who went that way's fault that they're in this mess. But the sad part about that is, it'd be no different if you were to take an untrained dog, let him off the leash, and he was just maul a bunch of people. Like, technically, if you're a man and you were to do some shit like that, you would go to jail. You would go to jail for a good period of time, and that dog would probably be euthanized or put down for all intents purposes. Depending on what you refer to it in your country, that dog would be put down for all intents purposes. And you would go to jail for a good period of time, because that's like pretty much taking a weapon into a fight for the most part, and like literally beating somebody to death with the weapon. Because taking pretty much letting a very very untrained, savagely aggressive dog off a leash and it just starts mauling people as a weapon, and you would go to jail for that. But the sad part about that is, I don't think I've ever really heard, or I may not have heard, a woman actually going to jail for the same damn crime, and or doing something of the same sorts. Because the sad part about that is, she can get mob justice anytime she wants to, but she doesn't have to suffer the consequences for her actions when the smoke clears. Only the people in the mob have to suffer the consequences for their action, for what she actually set in motion. And the sad part about that is, not too many women go to jail or get in trouble for pretty much sicking people on other people, because at the end of the day, we just look the other way and pretend like she just didn't sick people on other people, which is very sad. And and the sad part about that is, like I said, women are very aware of what's going on. What's up, Americans, by the way? Women are very aware of what's going on. The sad part about that is they don't have to take responsibility for anything that's going on that they're witnessing, and or, you know, got the ball rolling on, or, you know, got everything started in motion on, for all intents and purposes, for the fact that, because how society is set up, it's not their fault, it's the men's fault who actually did it for her. Plausible deniability, because she can say, well, I never told him that. Well, yes, you did. You're the one that riled up all these men to go do this stupid shit, and form a mob just for you. And now you're trying to actually say that it wasn't your fault, they did it on their own accord. And the sad part about that is, most courts actually believe this shit. And the sad part about it, even the courts who don't believe this shit, they tend to don't really charge the woman, or they'll give her probation, but they'll charge the men who are involved in this very harshly. It's typically how it works. Like, what you can't tell me is, now if I was to do some shit like that, I would be charged for, you know, the crime that was committed on a person and some. And the sad part about that is, women can pretty much get away with such carte blanche, or they'll get a slap on the wrist, or they'll get probation, or they'll serve like 6 months in jail, or just shit along the lines of that. Yeah, and the sad part about that is, what lawyers basically teach them how to stage domestic violence, for all intents and purposes. And the funny thing about it, the funny thing about that is the things that I've always found funny was it's not funny that it actually happens to men. And the sad part about that is there was one guy that actually got lucky. She called the cops on her husband, and she timed it to the point where like when he normally got home, and she called the cops on her husband, and when he showed up, he was getting arrested. And the crack team of police officers didn't even think just possibly the fact that he just showed up when you showed up, and all of a sudden he's going to be arrested for domestic violence, despite the fact that he never even made it in the house. Like, think about that. This is the crack police that we got, the crack police force that we got going on, and it's the funniest thing. Oh, I don't know what that is, to be honest with you. That buzzing sound, I don't know what it is or hiss. It might be my audio, or it might be something going on with it might be something going on with a program that I probably have open in on my computer, but um it might be a program that I have going on for all this work. What's up, Lorsos? And the sad part about that, when it comes down to it, like we don't we let them off for all intents and purposes. We let them off. Like it's whatever. It's like, wait, no, it can't be whatever. We got to do something about this, because if we keep this up, we're going to pretty much raise a society of people who believe that they can do shit with such carblage or such ease for all intents and purposes. Because the sad part about that is, like I was saying about the woman, the one guy that got lucky, the one guy that got lucky, he never came home. And the neat thing about that was, because he didn't come home, the cops actually went to his job and actually arrested him at his job, which is sad. But the thing was, her husband is currently abusing her. So when the cops showed up at the house and he wasn't there, she, despite the fact that when they looked at her, they didn't see any visible bruising on her, and they went to his job and picked him up. And the sad part about that, the only reason why I got off was for the fact that he was at work the whole entire time when she accused him of assaulting her or accused him of domestic violence, which was actually pretty crazy and off the wall funny. Because the sad part about that is, despite the fact that she accused him and they went to his job to go pick him up and take him back, and despite the fact that they didn't even ask if he even left work, or didn't ask anybody if he even remotely left work, they basically just picked him up, scooped him up, and basically took him off to prison, jail, I mean. And the sad part about that is, when it happened, it was so bad. It was so bad that the man had to actually go through it at first before somebody says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. Did you even ask the person where he was or what took place when this actually transpired?" And the sad part about that is they actually had to go back and actually do some actual some police work to actually find out what's actually going on. And the sad part about that is, come to find out, this guy was at work the whole entire time on camera, logged in at his computer, so it's virtually impossible for him to leave the building, especially because apparently they have this thing where they have this GPS system on they have this GPS on a lot of the key cards that a lot of their employees had, and he happened to be one of those people, so he actually never left the building. And the sad part about that is, they know he didn't leave the building because he's actually on computer. He has a GPS thing going for him, and he's logged into his computer, which is actually timed for every moment that he's actually on his computer and typing. It keeps track of the keystrokes. It keeps track of what he's actually doing. It keeps track of all that stuff. And the sad part about that is, only other way you can actually use his computer is unless you have his thumbprint. if you have a thumbprint for all intents and purposes. So if you don't have a thumbprint, you're not using his computer. But the sad part about that is he had to suffer for a week or two before people actually had to do the actual job to actually fix it. Yeah, for all intents and purposes, yeah, there was all that stuff. But the sad part about that, yeah, and it's sad that that actually happens in this day and age, and it happens all the damn time. And the sad part about that is because we live in this society where we can do shit like this, and women can get away with like such craziness. It's pretty much it's pretty much is what it is at this point in time, and it's going to be craziness for that reason, for the fact that there's just so much shit going on that nobody wants to question, or everybody wants to let slide. The sad part about that is when it happens, men are always the ones who are getting the short end of the stick for all intents and purposes, but they'll try to say that women are this and women are oppressed and women are this and women are that for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is we all know that's fake. We all know that's false. Because at the end of the day, for you to actually be able to say that this, that, and the other, and all this other craziness, that requires you to actually, if you're a man, that requires you to actually, actually bring some actual evidence. Whereas if you're a woman, it's pretty much we're going to believe her on her word because she's a woman. It's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is that's not the type of society that you want to live in. That is not the precedent you want to set for people in society if you want the society to grow and flourish as a society for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, if that's how you're going to approach this shit, that's exactly how shit's going to play out or pan out for all intents and purposes. Because what you can't do is sit up here and pretend to care or pretend to, you know, pretend to make it so that people are feeling the pinch on one side and not the other side. And it's funny. It's something I always found funny about that was it's wild how women always can go and do shit with minimum to no repercussions to their actions, whereas men, like, it could be the smallest the most minute thing. It's like they got to be punished severely to the extent of the law for some stupid shit that shouldn't even be a thing for all intents and purposes, all because women. And the sad part about that is, like I was saying, because we live in a society where we still treat women like they're this thing that can't do anything wrong. It's pretty much what it is because it's all about the bias. But the sad part about that is, even though this feminist thing is going on, women still want to be women want to be strong, but they want to be able to be a victim at any given time. For all intents and purposes, is how it works because they don't really want to be strong. They just want all the perks of being strong or faking like they're strong while still having the perks of actually playing the victim for anything that happens around them. And the sad part about that is they corner the market on victimhood. They corner the market on being able to pass blame off on other people or other other women or other men or their children or an inanimate object or a dog for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, this is society that we pretty much gave them to be able to do such. But the sad part about that is men in society also allow it to happen. And it's not just your regular old men. It's usually like your simp men or your cuck men or your beta bitch boys. People along the lines of that just let this shit happen. And the sad part about that is a good example of that is now I know as a human being, if I wear something that looks very, very nice on me, I'm going to garner attention. It is what it is. It's just facts. It is what it is. The sad part about that is women believe that they should be able to wear anything they want or nothing at all and not garner the same attention. The problem with that is, like I always say, 15% of the population does sick, vile things to living people, living beings for all intents and purposes. Let it be animal or let it be human being. So just because you want to do something, that doesn't make it right to do. Just because you want to do something, that doesn't mean that all these other people are going to say, "Oh, well, because she wants to do this, and it's her right to do this, and it's her God-given right to want to do this, we shouldn't commit these crimes about her or around her or on her." No, that's not how this works. Because if there's 15% of sick val people that will do sick val things to a human or any living animal or living thing, what the fuck do you think they'll do to you? Do you think because you believe you could do something that's going to stop them from doing anything? That'd be basically like saying, because I'm sexy, I can't get I can't get the flu or I can't get AIDS. Like, if you keep on participating in the activity that you're participating in, you're eventually going to get it. It's not going to be anybody's fault but your own. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much you want to point the finger at somebody else. If you didn't sleep around, you wouldn't get those STDs. If you didn't dress the way you do, there would be a higher chance of you not having to worry about your safety around you. And I'm not shaming, I'm not victim shaming, I'm merely telling the truth. If you didn't dress the way you did or didn't do that, take the actions that you actually did, there would be a higher chance you wouldn't have to worry about the safety around you. Because the sad part about that is women always talk about how unsafe they feel. Well, look at what you're wearing. Let's start with that. Look at what you're wearing. Look at how you're acting, especially if you're intoxicated. Unfortunately, we don't live in this Walgreens world where shit just goes away all because you think it should go away because your safety is at risk. The problem is, though, if your safety is at risk, you probably shouldn't be drinking that much, and you probably shouldn't wear clothing that can get you into the mess that you're getting in. That's typically how it works. Like, at the end of the day, I'm not going to go and wear blue and blood territory. That's typically the type of shit that women want to do, and the type of carte blanche, the type of thing that women want to actually be able to enact for the most part. What a woman basically wants to do in this society is basically wear blue colors in blood territory, or wear blue colors in Latin Kings territory. You can't do that. That's not smart, nor is that intelligent, nor is anybody going to feel sorry for you when all hell breaks loose around you. Because at the end of the day, you should have known better. It's typically how that works. That's the same thing that goes for women that want to dress slutty and go out. If you know you're going out at night, first off, you might want to take a partner in crime with you so you can go out in pairs and be somewhat safe, despite the fact that two of y'all ain't gonna do shit for one person for all intents and purposes. If the person really wants to commit a crime against you, it's not gonna matter if there's two of you or three of you if you're going to go up against this sick individual or this savage human being. It don't matter how many there you are. One of y'all better get away. One of y'all better grab a phone, and the most you can do is just run and hope and pray that your friend is okay. That's the most you can do. That's the sad part. And you better hope that he doesn't have a gun or a weapon in general, because at the end of the day, that's probably going to end up being your life. And the sad part about that is we live in a society where women could want to throw caution to the wind and believe that this world's so safe that they can do things and dress a certain way and act a certain way and not have to worry about repercussions and consequences, when in fact you unfortunately do have to worry about repercussions and consequences, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done and the smoke settles, it's your ass on the line. And the sad part about that is, if you've ever noticed, anytime something like very badly happens to a woman, there was a series of bad decisions that went into that whole entire situation that made it so that this shit is actually happening now. And the sad part about that is what I've noticed. What's up, Double I? What I've noticed about a lot of women who get themselves into situations like that is, one, they were out late at night. Okay. Two, they didn't walk in a well lit area. which blows my mind because most men even walk in well lit areas. Like I don't understand how women don't want to walk in well lit areas when in fact men walk in well lit areas. And the sad part about that is this is typically how men keep themselves out of getting robbed and or assaulted and or killed by random people for the fact that they walk in well lit areas. Typically, is how it works. The sad part about that, you got women that think, maybe I'll walk in the dark, they don't see me, when in fact the darkness ain't your friend. The darkness will pretty much get you killed, murdered, raped, anything anything, for all, assaulted, anything from all under the sun. Because the sad part about that is when you actually look at the whole entire crime and how the whole entire thing is set up, there was a series of bad decisions that got that woman into that situation. I'm not shaming women. I'm merely going off of the fact that all the crimes that I've actually seen thus far, 9 out of 10 crimes that I've seen thus far that involved a woman being a victim of, there was a series of bad decisions that she made that got her to that situation. There's always a series of bad decisions that she makes that gets her to that situation. Because the sad part about that is, like, a good example. We'll just use the whole entire, you know, I'm a woman. Hear me roar. I'm independent. I don't need no man. This, that, and the other. This, that, and the other. Women are equal to men. This, that, and the other. These are the same people that end up as victims. The same people who spew this shit are the same women who end up as victims. And the sad part about that is, at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, 9 times out of 10, or about 99.9% of the times, if a woman ends up in a violent crime or raped, she knows the person who did it, or she knows of the person who did it, or she's met the person who actually did it. That's typically how that works. 99.9% of the time, she knows of the person, or knows the person, or has met the person who's actually doing it to her. Like, let that shit sink in. Let that shit sink in. Whereas for a guy, if something happens to him like that, he didn't even know the person. Like, there's a high chance he doesn't even know the person. And the sad part about that is we brush that under the rug when it happens to a man, but we'll be quick to come to a woman's rescue, even if it doesn't happen to a woman, despite the fact that she doesn't have a rape kit, despite the fact that she didn't go to the police, despite the fact that she didn't do any of the necessary things in the chain of command or the chain of evidence to basically prove her point, or make it so that she's actually, we actually have a case. We'll just merely throw caution to the wind and just take it to trial because feelings. Like, you can't do that. And the sad part about that, like I said, most times, well, pretty much most of the times, if a woman is raped, she basically knows the person who's doing it to her. She knows of the person, or the person's been in her vicinity, or the person's very close to her for all intents and purposes when they actually commit the crime. The sad part about that is we live in a society where we want to make it sound like it's some monster that's a perfect stranger to her, when in fact it's somebody she knows. It's always, for the most part, somebody she knows. And the sad part about that is we give them this, this we give them this pass, and we want to make it sound like it's some random stranger from around the corner or some shit like that. And the sad part about that, the only reason why a lot of these cases tend to go to trial, or it really go as far as they do, is because, like I said, if a person that's going to rape a woman, 99.9% of the times, if she's getting raped, she knows the person. So therefore, if she knows the person's name, that's enough evidence for them to want to, press the case for all intents and purposes. And that's pretty much the society we live in. Or people can do that willy-nilly. And nobody even question it. Nobody even bats an eye. Nobody even, you know, talks about it or brings it to court, or, anything. They just let it go. They literally just let it go. They literally just let it go. Like it wasn't shit. And the problem that I have with that is how we go about it and the methods in which we use to go about it that makes it so that women can do this at a high rate, or women can do it and not really think about consequences of their actions for all intents and purposes. Um, but the sad part about that is, like I said, it's society, so you don't have very much of a choice but to accept the fact that we're doing this. What do you mean? How do you profit off all of this? The only way you can profit off of this is unless you're a pimp. That's the only other way you can profit off of anything of this, all of this stuff. Or if you can or unless you can make two women fight each other, you could probably make that a whole entire thing for all intents and purposes. If you can get two women to fight, fight about it, or fight over it, or fight for it, that's the only other way you could probably profit off of women and shit like that. Or unless you want to sell shirts saying "We believe her," hashtag "We believe her," is the only other way too. Yeah, and the sad part about that is a lot of men tend to do that. A lot of men tend to get arrested for shit like that. And the sad part about that is, oh, courts. The courts I meant. Okay, the courts you meant. Um, unless you become a judge yourself, that's the only way you're profiting off of it. Or unless you are willing and got the finances to take it to court to clear your name, despite the fact that even if you clear your name, you're still everybody in the community still sees you as the predator that you're not for all intents and purposes. So only thing I can think of is if you go to trial and it becomes public news that you're innocent of all this shit. The sad part about that, it doesn't really matter even if it becomes public news because you've already been tried by the court of public opinion and they already think you're a monster. So no matter how much the paper plays it, no matter how much the news reports it, you're always going to be seen as a monster in everybody's eyes because they believe that you're the man who got away. And this is typically why they can come up with these crazy ass statistics that say uh, uh, the reason why women don't report rape is because their captors always get away. When in fact, those statistics actually goes towards false rapes, not actual rape victims, but false rapes. This is the reason why captors can actually walk away. I mean, people that they claim murder captors can actually walk away for the fact that it's false rapes. So they're not going to try it, or they will try it. Then come to find out they don't got enough evidence, and or the person has evidence saying that he was elsewhere, and there's no DNA evidence on the woman from that person. You tend to have to pretty much let it go or let it slide. And the sad part about that is women will use that as a statistic to add to the fact that women aren't treated fairly when they're raped. Well, no. If you accuse somebody of rape, you don't get a rape kit, and a person actually has an alibi. You can't really accuse a person of rape anymore. It's pretty much a done deal. Especially if the person has an alibi being on a camera or somewhere else or is halfway across the world and or, happens to be like more than like 15 miles away from the actual scene of the crime. Like it doesn't work like that. There's no way in hell you can pull that off unless the person could teleport, which I highly doubt any men got teleportation powers for all intents and purposes, at least yet. The sad part about that is they'll try to use that and roll it into the statistics that this is why women don't want to report crimes because men always get away with crimes. No, men don't get away with crimes. They pretty much get acquitted of lies. Big difference between lies and crimes. When you lie, they get acquitted of the lie of the crime that you told. But the sad part about that, what you don't say and what you leave out is the fact that you're not being charged for filing a false police report, which is amazing to me because if a guy was to do some shit like that, and let's just say, even if the person didn't believe him or if the shit didn't really pan out the way that it needed to be, he would be charged with filing a false police report no matter what. And the sad part about that is, it's pretty much what it is. He would be charged with a crime when in fact it wasn't a crime. And the sad part about that is like this society we live in today, where you could just run up on somebody, point in their face, and accuse them of some shit, all because of your feelings. And it is what it is. Like we just have to accept the fact that you just accuse somebody of a whole ass crime, and then when the shit falls apart in court, we have to accept the fact that for some odd reason you're not being tried or being arrested for filing a false police report, which is fucking amazing. Like, so we have to accept that fact too. On top of that, we have to accept the fact that the person's innocent, even though we don't really mentally accept the fact that the person's innocent. We're still going to see him as a monster. We're still going to label him as a predator. And at the end of the day, you're going to get to walk away scot free because you believe it's a victimless crime, when in fact you just derailed a whole entire person's life for no fucking reason whatsoever. And the sad part about that is women could do this with such carte blanche that society sees it as okay, when in fact it shouldn't even be okay, nor should it be seen as okay. It's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is we let women do this, and we let women get away with this shit. Yeah, I wish I could teleport to Lord Sos. Shit, that'd be fun. And yeah, our reputation would be ruined. Our reputation's ruined. But the sad part about that, they'll try to say, well, nothing really happened and nothing really came of it. That motherfucker's on a sexual registry list. And it's going to take a while for him to get off that, if he can even get off of that list. Like, and the sad part about that, and the whole entire society sees him as a predator now. So you can't tell me that, oh, nothing really came of it, so he should be happy. No, he shouldn't be happy. What he should be is ready to pretty much slap the shit out of you for lying on him. Stealthing. The problem with the whole entire stealthy thing is it's only a thing because men have brought to light that women will take off condoms in the middle of sex, or take condoms and shove it up their pussy so they can pretty much get them pregnant so they can pretty much get pregnant by a man, or they'll take it and take a baster and shoot it up there for all intents and purposes. And that's the only reason why stealthing's actually a thing, because women have pretty much been put on blast for doing that shit. What's up, Yam? What's up? But yeah, typically the reason why stealthing's even a thing is because women are basically trying to come up with a counter argument for men, for all intents and purposes. And the sad part about that is, I look at it like this: if you don't trust the man who you're having sex with, you probably shouldn't be having sex with that man. It's typically how I look at that. Because at the end of the day, if you got to constantly check if the condom's on, or if you got to worry about if a condom is on, then then why are you having sex with that person? And another thing about stealthing that I found out recently is because the male condoms are so not made as durable as they used to be. A lot of these quote unquote stealthings are due to condom breaking or condom breakage. So they're really not stealthing the girl. The condom just broke. And the sad part about that, something else I also found out about that whole entire situation when it comes to the stealthing thing is, a lot of times during sex, the condom slides off, ends up in the woman. So that pretty much debunks stealthing for the fact that either A, the condom fell off, or B, it broke. It's not really stealthing if the condom's inside of you. That person should probably go with a smaller condom, or probably not use lubricant or they probably put it on wrong, or put it inside out where it's lubricated inside. So when they went in, they pretty much put it on backwards, and it probably slid off in the pussy, or either or it broke, or stuff like that for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, the sad part about that is that shit happens so often where it'll slide off in her pussy, or it'll break, and you'll keep on going and not even realize it. And the sad part about that is, here's the problem that I have with the whole entire argument of stealthing. You can tell the difference when there's a condom on and when there's not. So you can't sit up here and say that the person is stealthing you when in fact you can actually tell the difference between if when you're doing it with a condom on or a condom off. There's a big difference in the feeling, there's a big difference in the sensation, and there's a big difference in the contact that you're having the whole entire time with or without a condom. For all intents and purposes, women usually feel the difference. Women can feel the difference if a man's using a condom or not. So you can't sit up here and say you're being stealth when in fact there's a huge difference in the pleasure and the feeling that you're getting when you're having sex with or without a condom. There's a huge difference. Like there's much more pleasurable to have sex without a condom than it is to have sex with a condom. So for some odd reason, if it started off mediocre and all of a sudden out of nowhere you feel this huge rush of sensation, you might want to stop and check. Or you might want to stick your hand back there to make sure it's still on. Because the sad part about that is there's been many times when I've actually had sex and the condom broke. And I feel the difference. And the sad part about that is I actually stopped, got another condom and put it on. And she'd ask, what you doing? It felt so good. Yeah, I have to put on another condom. That's why I felt so good. Because it broke. Well, no, you could have kept going. No, I'm cool. I'm cool. I'm cool. And that's typically how I operate. And that's typically how it works. And that's typically how a lot of the shit happens for the fact that either the condom broke, like majority of those quote unquote cases, either the condom broke or the condom slipped off. And here's how you could tell when a woman's full of shit, because 9 times out of 10, when a condom slips off, it's usually inside of her. It's not stealthing if it's inside of her. It's not stealthing in the least bit if the condom's inside of that woman. And the sad part about that is most of the times when women are thinking they're getting these alphas, they're really getting gammas. So, like, because gammas are very good at somewhat looking like they're alpha for all intents and purposes, but then they end up being this huge creep and they take advantage of these women. And then they like, I don't understand how this happened to me. I thought he was a great guy. The sad part about that, there's a lot of gammas who can pose as alphas and they get very angry or very jealous of women and then be stalking them or following them and shit like that. Because at the end of the day, here's how you know a guy's not an alpha. If he starts stalking you or start demanding more of your time or starts controlling you or abusing you and shit like that, he's not an alpha. He's a gamma for all intents and purposes. And that's typically how a lot of that shit works. Because at the end of the day, that's not going to be a beta. That's going to be a gamma. Because betas are too passive to remotely, too passive aggressive to remotely do anything physical like that. And that's pretty much when you know you're dealing with a gamma. Because the sad part about that, there's a lot of gammas that pose as betas too. And then come to find out he really wasn't a beta. And typically what it is. So a lot of the men that a lot of the women get into relationships with, well, no, pretty much 100% of them, 100% of the men that women get into relationships with ended up going south. They were all gammas. They were all gammas. It's typically what it is. And a lot of the times, what happens with men becoming gammas, either they start off as gammas, or or what will happen is an alpha will lose its luster and it'll turn into a gamma. It's typically how it works. So most gammas are either start off as gammas and are socially awkward, or they don't really have communication skills, or they lack the communication skills that most people have, or they're not really good in social settings. Yeah, typically gammas pretty much are chameleons for all intents and purposes. Gammas can pretty much act like alphas, and they can pretty much act like betas. And the sad part about that, a lot of women actually fall for these gammas, which is actually pretty funny. Then like shit happens, and then like they end up in like some shit on some they end up on some what's it called? What's the name of that one channel? Lifetime. They end up in some Lifetime type shit for the most part. And when they actually date these men. So anytime a woman dates a gamma, she's pretty much going to end up in a Lifetime story type shit. And it's going to be it's the type of stories that you find on Lifetime for all intents and purposes. It's typically gammas for all intents and purposes. Any of those men in the Lifetime stories where a woman's being victimized or a woman got murdered or raped or anything like that are all gammas. A gamma is basically, yeah, to answer your question, casual bachelor channel, gammas are basically, they're pretty much chameleons. Um, they're pretty much all chameleons for all intents and purposes. That's the best way I can actually put it to you or actually describe it to you. They're pretty much chameleons, like Yam said, right here. And like you said, they pretty much prioritize women. Women's always one of their high priorities. Or getting a woman or looking at a woman, or they're always gazing at a woman and shit like that for all intents and purposes. Um, and it's just stuff like that pretty much makes it so. Yeah, for the most part, there is. For the most part, there is. This is why I always talk about the 15% of society that'll do sick, foul things to the human body. There you go. There you go. That's pretty much it. Six the six the 15% of society that do sick, foul things to the human body is pretty much it. Whatever, Yam. Well, the sad part about that, if you're an alpha, you never have to say you're an alpha. It's all about how the room perceives you and the crowd perceives you for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, if you're an alpha, you're not going to say you're alpha. The crowd pretty much labeled you as alpha and perceives you as alpha, or perceives you as the top dog in that room or the top dog in that area for that moment in time. It's typically how it works. So you never have to say you're an alpha, because it is cringe for if you actually want to say you're alpha, for the fact that you're not the one who actually gives yourself that title. It's the people around you that give you that title, that makes it so that everybody else knows that's who you are for all intents and purposes. Because as an alpha, you really don't have to do much but be there. Just show up for all intents and purposes. And if everybody's looking at you, or all eyes is on you, then you are an alpha. If all eyes aren't on you, then you saying you're an alpha is pretty much full of shit. Yam's admitting he's a gamma. I highly doubt Yam's a gamma. Um, Yam's probably Yam's probably in another category when it comes down to it for all intents and purposes. But Yam's a goofball. That's why I never listen to Yam. When he's in comment sections, never listen to Yam when he's in comment sections. But all intents and purposes, the cold hard reality of the day is we live in a society where women can pass blame and or not take fault for anything they do whenever they do it. Yeah, it would basically fall to the person with the skills at that moment for the skills and tools to basically, because the sad part about that, I always talked about this. A lot of times what happens is there's a lot of betas who have skill in a certain area. Like we'll say he's good at finances, or he's good at, you know, computers. Well, the sad part about that is there's a lot of times where, like, because he's good at a certain thing and because shit's going on and how it works, he has to step up and be the actual man for the moment. And the sad part about that is he's just a man for that moment because that's the skill, that's a skill set that he's good at for all intents and purposes. Yeah, and there's always going to be a lot of shifting, because at the end of the day, in this day and age right now, alphas are pretty much either extinct or dead. So a lot of the people who think they're alpha are only perceived that way because of a certain skill set that they had, and everybody enjoyed it at the time when they actually needed to enjoy it for all intents and purposes. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you're only as important as the demand of your skill set. You're only as important, or you're only as cool as the demand of your skill set. So we'll just say if you walk in a room and you know we'll just say the stove or the car or something's not working properly and somebody's stuck like Chuck. What happens is if you're skilled with the fixing a stove or a fucking car, you're going to be the alpha of that moment. You're going to be the hero of that moment for all intents and purposes, because that's typically how it works. And the shit is always going to be ever changing depending on the situation. You're not always going to get that high feeling of being the alpha in this day and age, for the fact that nobody's always you're not always going to be around when somebody's car needs to be fixed, or you're not always going to be around when a stove needs to be fixed, or when something needs to be fixed. So for all intents and purposes, that high as feeling as though you're alpha comes and goes. And the sad part about alphas is alpha males are only situational in the first damn place. So they're only alphas in specific situations. They're not alphas across the board. They're not going to be alphas in every single thing that they do. They're only alphas in the things that they're skilled at, or the things that they excel in very well at, for all intents and purposes. And this is typically why you'll get a lot of betas that believe that they're alphas because they excel in certain areas, when in fact it's because you just got the attention of everybody, and now you're the it guy. It'd be no different if you went into work and everybody's locked in and you were skilled at unlocking electronic locks. You would be seen as a hero for that moment in time. You would be seen as a top dog for that moment in time. But the sad part about that is, with every moment like that, everything passes and goes into obscurity, and everybody forgets about it, and your hero done disappeared for the fact that everybody done moved on. It's typically how it works. Um, you're a trip. The sad part about that is, a lot of in this day and age, especially with the computer age, a lot of omegas get called up quite often to actually fill the role. Because if you're really good at computers, like there's people that are good at computers, then there's people that are really, really good at computers. So a lot of times, the people who are really, really good at those computers tend to be omegas for all intents and purposes, and they get praised for that moment in time. And depending on how they look while they're fixing that computer, they might get some poom poom. For all intents and purposes, if they don't look too off putting or sound too nerdy or geeky, they get some poom poom. Um, that's the neat thing about it. Uh, yeah, Sigmas are where it's at, most definitely. Um, Yam is Megatron. That's funny. Public recognition goes hand in hand with beta. Yeah, and that's typically how it works. A lot of times, so does private submission. Yeah, and the sad part about that is a beta is always going to submit to an alpha or his wife for all intents and purposes, and it's typically how it works. A lot of times, a lot of betas tend to be second fiddle to their wife, or even though they're making all the money, they get belittled or they get belittled or treated like they ain't shit at home for all intents and purposes. I'm high on life. Unlock your inner bitch. Yeah, yeah, for the most part. Sometimes you got to. Tico. Yeah, they have. They have learned some basic coding at their age. I think the only person that hasn't was Laszlo. All the rest of my children pretty much learned it. Lazo and the twins, because obviously the twins aren't in school yet. But yeah, all the rest of the children pretty much learned it, and I think Lazo is going to learn it next year. Well, this year coming up for all intents and purposes. Because the sad part about that is, uh, we're starting to get into things where Lazo is actually going to learn some basic coding, whereas Talia's already learned basic coding. My daughter's already learned basic coding and shit like that. Hell, my oldest two daughters are on advanced coding for all intents and purposes. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of people who actually there's a lot of schools depending on what school district or what school your children go to that they're going to learn different things depending on the resources of the school and how much resources that school has and what that school is able to teach and what they're not able to teach for all intents and purposes based on if it's like a private school or if it's a school in a good neighborhood, if it's a public school in a good neighborhood, or if it's like a school in a shitty neighborhood for all intents and purposes. They're going to learn things based on what their neighborhood can actually afford and actually offer you for all intents and purposes. But yeah, there is a lot of homeschool. There's a lot of homeschooling that seems way better than other public schools. And the sad part about that is it's actually pretty true. Hell, there's a lot of schools that actually teach that in their curriculum to elementary school kids for all intents and purposes. And the funny thing about that is it's a part of their actual thing. Hell, there's actually schools that teach kids in middle school how to run businesses. Like, think about that shit. There are middle schools that literally teach kids how to run businesses, how to be business owners, which is actually pretty funny. Um, thanks, America's DeVille. Worship the snatch. Started Omega, forged into Sigma. I like that. Through hardships and traits. Have the traits of both. Nice. Nice one there. Yeah, because the sad part about Minecraft is if you ever played Minecraft, there's already an economic thing set up in Minecraft where you can actually teach people that type of stuff better. You can pretty much teach people how to run a household, be responsible adults, or be responsible young people by letting them play Minecraft for all intents and purposes. And that's the neat thing about it. Like, Minecraft literally is a nice way of helping people understand how the world actually works. And I want to say that there's actually a YouTube video on YouTube where somebody basically broke it down, broke down economics using Minecraft. They literally broke down the world economics using Minecraft, which is actually pretty amazing. Well, not really amazing, but like for most people who don't really understand Minecraft, it blows their fucking mind. But for people who actually understand Minecraft and economics, it's like, well, yeah, I can see that. And that's one of the funny things. And the sad part about that, a teacher's creativity is based on the teacher themselves and what the school will allow them to do. If the school gives them the creative freedom to do so, they'll probably end up being great teachers for all intents and purposes. Um, if the school doesn't give them creative freedom, then they basically have to either be creative within themselves and be able to come up with the thing to be able to make it so that they stand out among other teachers for all intents and purposes. Because I know a lot of broke ass schools where the teacher's so fucking creative, she's able to pull shit together with scraps of paper and popsicle sticks and make it amazing, if you know what I mean. Or use something like Minecraft to basically make it work for her students so she can actually be a great teacher. And that's typically how it is. Um, you're simple as hell, Yam. Simple as hell. Just simple as hell. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Beta Bucks Deluxe. Deluxe, that's funny. Yeah. The sad part about that, there's other categories too. There's also Zeta with a Z. There's also deltas too. Um, is another group of people for all intents and purposes. Um, not Catherine Zeta Jones. Basically, it's the same thing as Zeta. Yeah, same thing as Zeta, but it's not Catherine Zeta Jones. There's actually Zetas. Yeah, deltas are also a part of that. Also, Bucks Deluxe. Y'all two are a trip. They actually described a delta to you. A delta is a more responsible alpha. They have dreams and aspirations, but they're more responsible about it, and to they're less likely to take risk to get to get what they want. They're more likely to do it in a safer environment for all intents and purposes. I would mark them as more of a cautious alpha for all intents and purposes, is what you would normally call them. They're more so cautious alphas. They tend to be very smart. They're highly intelligent. They're very intelligent. They have their flaws too. Like all the fucking all the different categories, they have their flaws too. But they're typically very cautious alphas. This is the best way I can actually describe it to you. Um, yeah, that's technically how I can describe it to you. Um, um, Stuff along the lines like that. Um, but yeah, does anybody have any more questions? Well, no, because Iron Man is actually more of an alpha for the reasoning because he's more willing to take risk. Is Zeta a cautious beta? No. Zeta's pretty much Zeta. Anybody that's a Zeta basically is almost like a mindset. It's a mind state or a state of mind for all intents and purposes. It's typically most people can actually transition to being the Zeta. A good example of that is when I talked about there was a woman that was coming down the steps and she was on her phone and she wasn't able to she didn't pay attention to where her foot was going to land, and she went and she tripped and missed a step and went forward, and she was coming towards me so I could probably catch her and grasp her and fall, and I merely just moved out of her way, and she slid by me, hit her face on the bar, and went down the stairs. That was based anytime like a good example of a Zeta would be the men on the men on the one car where that woman was being beat up by a guy. They got up and moved to the back, or a guy that pretty much can step over anybody's body after they get fucked up, or a guy that pretty much doesn't care about anything in his surroundings or anything in his immediate environment for all intents and purposes, and only thing he can think of is himself at the time, and getting himself home safe or sound. Because here's the neat thing about a Zeta. They might sound like dicks or savages, but at the end of the day, a Zeta would only defend somebody if they're not in the wrong for all intents and purposes. Um, the sad part about Zetas is for them, they don't really believe in chivalry. They're more likely to look the other way when it comes down to a lot of shit. A Zeta is basically a mind state, a state of mind. A Zeta is able to look at a situation, assess it, and say, there's no point in me getting involved in a situation, no matter how crazy it's getting. It's typically what a Zeta would do. They'll pretty much mentally check out of any situation, no matter how stressful it is, and they'll basically maintain their composure while doing so. It's typically what it is. They'll basically check out mentally. It's basically a state of mind that you can go into. Like the thing I've noticed about Zetas too is they typically can do things that they tend to be. It's almost damn near like almost like a plane of existing. It's like a higher plane of existing for all intents and purposes. It's like you pretty much know your environment. You know that the person's in a wrong, so therefore you're not going to get involved because you're able to understand the situation that the person's in. You're able to read the situation, and you're able to understand all the context and everything and the nuance around the whole entire situation, so you don't get involved in the whole entire thing. It'd be typically like if I was. It's like the one time when I was actually walking down the street and I tried to stop the person from walking out in the street because a car was coming. They pushed my hand away, walked out in the street, and ended up over the hood of the car. So when that happened, I literally stepped over their body and crossed the street where everybody was looking at me like I was crazy. I stepped over their body and kept it moving. Because at the end of the day, I tried to help you. You pushed me away. Now your ass is on your back. Well, no, they weren't really on their back. They literally got contorted in a way where it looked like their torso was like broken. It literally looked like their torso was broken the way they landed over the other side of the car. It looked like their torso was twisted damn near in opposite directions. Like their upper body was twisted right and their lower body was twisted left or something like that. Um, when they landed, and I stepped over the body, and I was like, "That's what you get," and just kept it moving. And that's typically the type of things that I'll do because if I help you, or if I know you're in the wrong, I'm not going to help you. If I help you, and I attempt to help you, and you actually act ignorant, I'm not going to help you from the repercussions that follow, for all intents and purposes. Because the sad part about that is I don't have to. Or a good example of being a Zeta is when I told the story about the Asian woman who I basically I was crossing the street minding my business, going to go visit my niece at school, and this Asian woman clutched her purse and moved far away from me on the sidewalk because she thought I was going to rob her. So the funny thing about that, before the light changed red so she could cross the street, this Asian woman took off across the street. White guy comes from the opposite direction. He snatches her purse and runs back the other direction, runs back towards me, past me, and the Asian woman's looking at me like I'm supposed to defend her. That's a Zeta mindset right there. When you can literally watch the shit happen and you keep it moving and say, "Fuck you, lady." Literally, "Fuck you, lady." And the sad part about that is when it comes to a Zeta mindset, you pretty much check out mentally, especially if they treated you wrong or did something that that offends your character. You're able to check out much easier and go into Zeta mindset when the shit happens. Because like I've done it multiple times. I've went into Zeta mindset multiple times over various over like in a short amount of time. Like I look at it like this: if you're going to treat me as a criminal when shit happens to you, don't expect me to be your hero. That's typically how I feel and live. That's how I live my life and how I feel. If you're going to treat me like I'm a criminal when I'm not doing anything wrong to you, when the shit hits the fan, don't look to me to be your hero. That's typically how I feel. And that's typically a Zeta mindset when it comes down to it. Because if you treated me like a criminal and shit hits the fan, I'm going to pretend like I don't see you getting your ass beat or robbed or beaten to enter your life. Or I don't care what's happening to you. It don't matter what's happening to you. If you treated me like a criminal, I'm going to look the other way. I'm going to pretend like I don't see the shit going on with you. And I'm probably not going to see the shit going on with you because I'm going to look the other way and keep it moving. And that's typically how I operate. That's typically how I deal with a lot of people like that. And I don't care. Don't look for me as a witness because I'm going to be in the win like I did it. It's typically how I feel about that situation. I'm being a win worse than a criminal like I actually committed the actual crime. So all the financial resources are going to be spent on trying to find me to call me in as a witness. It's typically how it works. I'm glad you weren't the killer. Well, yeah, I'm not. Yeah, obviously. Yes, they're starting to get very convoluted. I'm about to bring it back. Tico's my hero because he's the last honest criminal. No. Well, and it is what it is. I'm going to look the other way, and I'm being a win. And if you call me as a character witness, I'm going to be in a win like I did it. That's typically how I work. I'm gonna run away like I actually committed the crime, and I'm being a win better than the criminal. And it is what it is. Like you're not gonna sit here and treat me like shit, and then and then try to act like and try to act like I'm all of a sudden your hero now. No, because I'm gonna pretend like I didn't see it, or I'm gonna act like I didn't see it, and I'm going to be very convincing that I didn't see it. Even if I didn't see it, I'm gonna act like I didn't see it because I'm gonna ignore you. I'm gonna ignore the whole entire situation and keep it walking, and I'm not gonna see shit, and I'm not gonna hear shit because I'm gonna put my earphones in. It's typically how it works. Um, because I am not that guy. I am not that guy, and I'm not willing to actually take. I'm not willing to actually help somebody who's willing to actually denigrate me or treat me as such. They smash and dash. Well, no, I don't have to smash and dash. Usually, most other people do it, and I just basically that they like the criminal usually does the smashing, and I usually do the dashing when the cops start looking for witnesses. It's like, we got any witnesses? Nope. Disappear on you like Batman and shit. But no, you didn't. I hate that song. I can be your hero, baby. I hate that song. Well, all the heroes are pretty much gone because there's no point in being a hero if a woman can be strong and independent by herself. The sad part about that is there are heroes, but the heroes that the women get nowadays aren't the men that they dream of, aren't the men that they swoon over. They're basically all simps and cucks and white knights for all intents and purposes that are all the heroes. All the savage men that women want to bang aren't being heroes no more. They're not trying to be your hero for all intents and purposes. It's typically how it works. And the sad part about that is they're all gone, and all they have left is these simps, white knights, and cucks that are willing to pretty much cater to their every whim. And the sad part about that is it's like the whole entire hero thing would be equivalent to a Twitch thought basically meeting her Twitch followers in person. Here she thinks that she got all these handsome Twitch followers that she has, and when she goes and meets them, she comes to find out they're not all handsome, and they look ugly as hell, and they look like basement dwellers for all intents and purposes. Because most of the men who follow these women on Twitch are basically just that. That's all it really is, for all intents and purposes. And they probably live at home with their mom, or they probably can't get a girl in the first damn place because they probably lack social awareness and social cues and social skills. So what? Yam is crazy. He plays all the time at your restaurant. I believe it. Yeah, you're Yeah, that's good. You're liberating. Your wallet, your choice, most definitely. We'd say men garden or wallet gang. Right? 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 Wallet gang. For real. Wallet cartel. No, but that's funny. I like that. Lord of the Rings, engagement ring, wedding ring, suffer ring. That's nice. But I'm gonna let y'all guys go because this podcast went on too long. Y'all be good to yourselves. Treat yourselves like milk. Do nothing but spoil yourselves. Be good to yourselves and always better yourselves. Um, y'all have a good one. Peace.